Hello everyone, welcome to today's video webinar, Modernizing Application and Desktop Delivery. I'm Mark Bowker, Senior Analyst with Enterprise Strategy Group. Today's IT professional has various contingencies that are overwhelming them that really center around consumerization of IT. This involves the rapid innovation of the consumer market and all those different devices, all those different instant access to applications that they expect and they get from the consumer side, they want inside a corporate environment. The typical corporate governance, compliance, security mandates that are still on IT that they still have to deal with as we deliver applications, desktops to these various devices. The mobilization of the workforce, people working from their homes, working from remote offices, working outside the corporate network essentially. And then also different ways to actually deliver these different applications and desktop deliveries together with those legacy applications. They are not going to go away anytime soon. We still need to deal with them. Recent ESG research shows that there's a lot of push from end users when we ask who's most responsible for change in endpoint device usage. It's really two things at the top there. It's really endpoint device usage really being pushed or demanded by the end users, and it's also the mobilization, again, of that workforce. It used to be single user, single device, applications delivered. We get pretty good at managing that. Now, typically a user can be walking around with 3 different devices, their laptop, a tablet, and their smartphone, and being able to do so, how are we going to confidently deliver application desktop access across all those different devices? Here we see more than ever the devices that are in demand. There shouldn't be any big surprise here. Smartphone usage, tablet computers, definitely on the rise, being demanded by those end users. The desktop is changing though. So in the past, where we took all the user settings, application, operating system, and data, built it all together and delivered it all to a single device. It's all encapsulated, managed as a single unit. Today, what's happening is they're actually being split out. So actually, our user settings and profile are being virtualized or separated from that desktop image. Same thing with applications, same thing with operating system. And what's happening, they're all being dynamically assembled at runtime. So now as an IT professional, I can manage each of these separately, and I can deliver them to those different devices based on location, policy, and even the device itself or form factor of that device. So when we ask people what are the alternative application delivery models they're looking at, as you can see here, there's not one that runs away from the pack. They're doing multiple delivery models. This includes designing applications for the web, software as a service, certainly growing exponentially over the last few years that we've been tracking it. There's also a notion of being able to design or build applications specifically for a mobile device or actually even a tablet environment. And then doing desktop virtualization as well. But there's not one method. People are doing many methods here to address new application delivery models and to these different device types. So we'll really take application desktop delivery models and split it into 6 different ways of doing it. So you have the traditional legacy or traditional way of deploying an application to a desktop or to a laptop. Then we have software as a service. Applications are delivered from a hosting provider, service provider. This is kind of the extreme opposite of the traditional approach. Then we've got the case where we're actually designing applications specifically for an operating system, for a mobile device. So specifically designing for iOS, Android, Windows Mobile, BlackBerry, whatever it may be, but taking an application we may use in-house today, putting it on or designing and choosing a specific device. Then we're seeing things like HTML5, for instance, making some new web application or web approach become pretty interesting. There's certainly desktop virtualization. That's really taking my desktop environment, putting it inside the data center, being able to stream it to those end users. There's a couple different ways of doing that, but we're seeing that become interesting in certain use cases. Then there's always application virtualization. That's been around for a while. We're taking the application, putting it inside the data center, streaming it into the operating system. But IT is not necessarily doing one of these. We have to be able to look across all 6 of these and understand the codependencies and how they work together. So if we look at it, if we have the different endpoint devices that we're dealing with, usually more than one per user, they're all being connected to the different application desktop deliveries, being traditional software as a service, mobile applications, web applications, desktop virtualization, application virtualization. We also have to pull in, and anybody in IT thinking about this has to think of online file management, collaboration, or really the social enterprise, and even unified communication. When we start to put this together, there's a big question mark in the middle of how do we do this. We've certainly seen point-to-point solutions. People do this very well. For instance, deploy VDI for a certain segment of users, and it works well for that certain segment of users, but not really being targeted for the population at large. As these different devices are adopted, maybe even using a BYOC, or bring your own computer, or bring your own device inside your environment, coupled with the ways that IT is going to deliver it, creates this demand or spawns this complexity of how they're actually going to confidently deliver that productive environment for the end user. So to further complicate it, now we've got different endpoint devices, we've got these different application desktop delivery models, and where is it all coming from? Certainly, it may be locally installed on that laptop or desktop, and maybe on-premise as a VDI type of environment, or a locally application virtualization on-prem inside my data center. I may take my data center and host it somewhere. So I may do more of a hosted private. I'm working with a service provider, maybe a regional one, and we're taking and hosting it there, but I've still got to pull it and ultimately assemble it to a device. I may have a public cloud that it's actually coming from, software as a service, oftentimes Salesforce being kind of the typical example we hear in that environment. And then also I have my personal apps. I want to be able to have devices that work across both my corporate and personal apps. So now I've really got to think about all those different endpoint devices, the delivery models in the middle, and ultimately where it's coming from, creating further confusion and ultimately creating the need for a bigger strategy. So at the end of the day, I want to be able to bring all these together and create a common policy, security, and user-aware environment that glues all these together. By no means am I saying that there's one product that can do all this. You press a magic button, deploy it, and everything's glued together. But the thinking here and strategy behind doing this needs to be thought about. How do I take those different devices, marry it to those different application desktop delivery models? I also have to be thinking about files. And when I say files, I mean user data here. What am I going to do? How am I actually going to be delivering that? We see lots of models out there that get pretty interesting from a Dropbox type environment. Now, how can we bring that into our desktop and delivery strategy, be able to apply policy, security, and context awareness to those environments as well? And then pulling in that whole social enterprise, collaboration, and unified communication need to be thought of this strategy as well. Typically, the things we want there is we want it very user-centric. We want it to be focused on the user, not the device. There's got to be some common or at least shared identity and access management across those different devices, across those different application desktop delivery strategy. I've got to be able to orchestrate or have some dynamic workflow from an IT perspective. So as I'm setting policies, I can assemble those different components, confidently deliver those to the devices. I want license tracking, I want analytics and reporting, and even want to create more of a help desk or really a self-help for my end users that they can go in, have some type of portal or have some type of storefront even that they can go into and start compiling the list of applications and desktops they need based on their device usage. We really believe that over time, the market and vendors are going to specifically align with the current state of where things are today. Very tactically focused. Sure, we see things like VDI being deployed for that right environment, but a lot of times there's a lot of stalling happening there. Not all the proof of concept are working. So there's a little bit of stall effect taking, but there's more alignment of where people are going to start to look at this from a common strategy approach. Taking those different desktop delivery models and application delivery models, coupling with those different devices, remembering ultimately where those applications, desktops, data, collaboration is actually coming from. We believe things like Microsoft Windows 8 will have a lot to do with this when that new operating system comes out. That will be a trigger point at least a year after, probably in most cases, when people start to deploy it. So that first 12 months of release will get pretty interesting how people start to look at how am I going to take my desktop, deliver it differently, take more of a strategic approach as opposed to tactically deploying these different solutions, and ultimately over time, taking more of the storefront approach. Now I have a user that logs in for the first time, logs into their storefront, and across storefronts. It could be actually across my enterprise storefront, and I could even be pulling from what I'd say more public storefronts as well, but being able to commonly identify who I am, be able to deliver that application across that network, know what network I'm on, apply policy, and then know what device I'm on. So if I'm on my laptop, the application gets shown in one way. I'm used to using a mouse and keyboard there. Gets delivered to a tablet, good size viewing screen still, but I'm using some tapping and usually, being able to use those controls as well. If it gets delivered to my phone, form factor smaller. Now I've got some little bit different things, but it recognizes those things, applies policy as needed based on the device or on the application delivery model. So there's a great opportunity to really embrace the consumerization of IT. The first thing we need to do is think beyond VDI. Great point-to-point solution. We've seen successful implementations of it, but be able to think, how has that helped you from a short-term perspective, but pull in a bigger vision. Think of a longer-term strategy. Understand the impact of all those different devices, different application desktop delivery models, where they're coming from, and how you're going to apply that list of things that we went through. Common policy, access and identity, being able to set context aware, knowing which device I'm coming from, what network and when. And being able to pull in those different pieces that we talked about, collaboration, social enterprise, unified communication, and that whole online file management as well. There's a great opportunity here to stand out as an IT professional, being able to think beyond where you are today and how you're going to transition your end user community to higher productivity for the long-term future of the company. I'm Mark Bowker, Senior Analyst, Enterprise Strategy Group. Thank you very much for joining us today.